involved, and then we'll turn to hearing some of the verbal submissions. So I have today apologies from Councillor Pascoe. I have no other apologies. Not from members, and I think we've got on Zoom, we've got Councillor Gallagher. A very warm welcome, Martin. Thank you, Councillor Maxine and Councillor Mark Donovan. So I'll move the apologies. Councillor Maxine will second. Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. The agenda is not changed. The run list has been provided. So I will confirm the agenda. I'll move. Councillor Donovan second. All those in favour say aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Declaration of interest. None required. No declaration declared. Confirmation of the traffic speed limit and road closure hearing panel open minutes of the 3rd of May. I was in attendance, so I will move. Can I have a second? Councillor Donovan, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Thank you. Right. We are now on to item 5. Sorry, Councillor Mixon?
I wondered if we hear from our visitors.
Yes. So that's the comment. That's part of 5. That's all right, Maxine. Okay. So as part of 5, we hear the submissions. The first submitter I have is Peter Boss. Peter, a very warm welcome. You're well known to us. You know our processes. So I see we've allocated 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
And their staff and behind me, people. Living Streets Kirikara is a local group of Living Streets Aotearoa. We promote walking friendly communities, and we want more people walking, and the Hamilton City Council proposed changes to Mahoe Melville area support this. Thank you. Living Street supports Hamilton City's safer speeds areas and supports the lower speed limit project in Mahoe Melville area. Living Streets asked for a raised crossing on Mahoe Street entrance. The curb cut downs are nasty, unfriendly, awkward to use. They did try and improve them when they did the shared path along there, but it didn't actually. The gradients and the shapes of the road doesn't. And so what happens if you're pushing pushchair or if you're on a bike, the moment you commit yourself to crossing, you look down and you're no longer looking left or right. Living Streets supports the Prisk Street new raised platform for better access to shops. There is an image I've emailed through on Kakatia Drive, Tawa Street.
Yes, we have that. We'll put it up on the overhead screen for you. Peter?
Living Street supports the Mount View Road upgrade for the by the intermediate school. And Living Street supports slower traffic on Yvonne Street. This has got a long history of near misses and crashes. The power pole on that corner, if you looked at the map, seems to attract cars.
Just bear with us one moment,
yes.
Peter, as we get this photo up so that we can...
Apologies, Peter, I don't have that photo. Do you know where you sent it to?
I've sent it to Raywin and Councillor Wilson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I've lived on Mahoe Street, and my sons have lived at the end of Mahoe Street, and my daughter-in-law grew up on Yvonne Street. So we're very familiar with the speed problems we have and the risks and the history of bad outcomes. So while you're looking for that, I could just go on to another subject I wanted to comment on is nuisance parking. Like nuisance dogs, need ongoing enforcement. It does not go away just by providing more parking. So Living Streets asked Hamilton City Council to invest more in parking nuisance management. And then another part of this parking comment is not everyone will own a car, but people will still need access to parking for short-term visits from support people, for courier drop-offs, and for Uber-type pickups, and many other necessary activities. So Living Streets asks that for people who do not own a car, but still need short-term visiting. Nope, I missed a line. So what we're asking, Living Streets asks that between 10% and 20% of on-street parking be time limited, so that there is parking available for people who do not own a car but still need short-term visits from support people, courier drop-offs, Uber-type pickups, and many other necessary activities. Okay. So,
That was the,
that was the attachment.
yep.
Okay, that's not. Okay, I'll try and explain it. Tower Street is. Who's familiar with Tower Street? Yep, Tower Street, Hendall Murray at the end of it. Yep. There's they built NZTA built a cycle path, a shared youth path along Kakati Drive. Turns, if you're travelling towards the hospital, it turns right towards Tower Street, and it crosses Tower Street at the three intersections. Coming from the other Tower, T-A-W-A. Yeah, thank you. And from the other direction, coming from the hospital or Haupa Road, you follow the Tower Street, and then you turn right, and then you stand on a corner, and there you have very good visibility between the cars and the traffic. So heading north is quite a good crossing, but heading south, oh there we are. Yes, heading south is the yes, where your marker was just there. It's a slight rise. There's a fence along where that car is parked, and there's a power pole, and there's cars coming from three directions, and so you're trying to look a hard right, a hard left, a left and a right, and being 50k speed zone, it's really hard to judge the distances and speeds. And again, because it's a rise as you're crossing, you do tend to look down at the moment you commit yourself to crossing. So this is, you're proposing a raised traffic crossing, and we very much support that. That'll make it safer. At the moment, it's probably, I would think it's one of the most dangerous crossings in the city for especially people on bikes, because you do need to, they like to try and continue on, but you do need to stop and look. And then when you move off again, you do look down. And it's that moment of inattention that is the greatest risk. Does that explain it well? Oh, that's the end anyway. You can ask questions if you need to.
All right. Thank you. Apologies for not having that photo up.
That's
usually these things would be sent to governance.
Yeah.
As they are the masters of all the system.
Yes,
I saw the email come in that so I apologise.
No, that's
Raywin, I understand, works in our communications department, so that was the other person you copied in, but apologies. No. Councillors, do you have any questions of Mr. Boss? I don't see any online. I see none in the chamber. Thank you very much for your submission. Right, the next speaker is Joanne. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'll just get this.
Joanne, I see you're from the Colours Hair Company.
That's correct.
Wonderful. We've allocated 10 minutes. Please leave a few minutes at the end to enable some questions. Focus on the salient points. You have the floor.
Thank you. Sorry, it's not recognising my face. I think there's too much light in there. I have a PowerPoint presentation. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Right. Just getting blinded by the light there. Sorry. So yes, my name's Joanne Rusden and I own Colours Hair Company at 11 Liverpool Street. I've owned the business there for 9 years and I've been 45 years in my industry. I'm here speaking on behalf of 10 other tenants that are opposed to the proposal of taking 16 of the present 29 car parks and putting them into all-day parking. No one else could actually come today. I've had several apologies this morning. We're self-employed business people. Joe had auctions today. Krishna had a staff down and had to cover staff, meetings, clients, all of that. So I'm here on behalf of everyone to, put across everyone's point of views with this. All right. Could I have the next slide, please? So the diagram up here represents all of the businesses that are opposed to this happening. Now, I've met and talked to, so there's 11 of us, so Lodge Real Estate Joe at the cafe, so I'm going from the right-hand side to the left. You've got Krishna and Clara in the cafe. You've got Matt and Kieran in the sports shop. You've got Martin in the Asian supermarket. John at Bartercard. You've got Phil and Aaron at Spates Ale House. You've got Maddie at Escape. You've got Dave at King's Radio. Myself, and then also Janet at the sushi shop. So there's quite a number of us there. So the next slide, please. So the next slide shows the building owners. So there are 5 building owners that are also opposed to this happening. So Lodge own all of the shops on the right-hand side there, the corner and their car park. My landlord owns the 3 shops on the corner. Martin's owner, Phil and Aaron. So those are the owners that are also opposing this. Okay, the next slide, please. I'm clear that the council have many focuses. However, these are the ones that, to me, are pertinent to us today. So number 1, to encourage shoppers back into central Hamilton, to have a thriving centre with successful businesses that choose to be there in central Hamilton. A strong view on the environment, so you're encouraging employees to walk, cycle and use public transport, reducing the number of cars in the central city. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, to encourage shoppers back into central Hamilton. By taking away car parks in Liverpool Street, surely it will make it more difficult for customers to find a park and consider going elsewhere where it is easier. In other words, other places that have free parking or more available parking. Next slide, please. To have a thriving centre with successful businesses that choose to be there. By taking away car parks, it will make business owners feel unsupported, especially in the hardship of the last 2 years where COVID has been very, very hard on businesses and still happening, and either not survive or leave the central areas. Next slide, please. A strong view on the environment, encouraging employers to walk, cycle or use public transport. And making more than half of the car parks in our street into all-day commuter parking. This is going against the council's focus and enabling people to bring cars into town. There has been cycleways put into place, which is great. However, the bus system, as I am aware, has been on a reduced schedule ever since February, and is there anything that's been done to support that getting up to full strength? Next slide, please. So I want to talk about things you may not have considered. So when you were checking the parking utilisation in Liverpool Street, there are a couple of things that could have influenced. Spates has been closed, so Spates Ale House has been closed from August 2021 until June 2022, doing renovations for quite some time. So they've made no demand on the street there at all. Also, I have a large shop near to me. There's there are 2 shops joined as one that used to be Prima Vino on the corner there, and it's been vacant for more than 2.5 years. Now, There's someone looking at it at the moment in a space for a restaurant. So therefore, that large space also has had no demand on the car park. I want to talk about, so hold on, oops, I've just gone forward. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is COVID has had a huge impact and immensely hard on our businesses. Obviously, with the lockdowns, March and April earlier this year, the government offered subsidies if turnover was down by 40% and more. Now, I didn't think I would have to use that. But instantly, when we had that other wave, my turnover was down by 39% and up to 48%. And I had to take that subsidy for the 3 options that they did. You've got sick staff with COVID and sick clients. We've had 20 cancellations in 1 week, and even just yesterday, we arrived to have 5 cancellations, and we had 7 hours of cancellations just yesterday. So it's a moving target for us, and it's still really, really hard doing business in this climate. Harwood Street, Nisbet Street, Clarence Street, Knox Street and Grantham Street do not have retail and service shops on them. So to me, comparing Liverpool Street to those other streets are like comparing apples to cabbages. We're completely and utterly different. So we rely on car parks for our business to thrive and to prosper. Now, in your agenda, and I quote, consultation with adjacent property owners, occupiers, and any other affected parties has been undertaken for each of the proposed changes. In general, the feedback received was positive and supportive to proposed changes. I'd be interested to know in our street, given 11 of us are opposing it, who was positive? Because all of the retail businesses are dead against this. Could I have the next slide, please? So the next slide shows you 2 photographs, and this is a Wednesday morning where Lodge have their auctions. They have, on the left-hand side, that is their car park, and they have 20 car parks in their personal Lodge car park. And then the photograph on the right is their demand for the street. So there was very little left on a Wednesday morning from 9 a.m. till 12 o'clock when Lodge have their auctions. So next slide, please. So the impact on us. So I'm speaking on behalf of all the other tenants, and this is my version, and they'll have their own version. So I purchased my hairdressing salon 9 years ago. It's been around for 25 years. And one of the greatest advantages was the parking. It was city fringe, great. We're still, close to central town, but not in central town. I can easily have, I have 12 styling chairs and 8 processing chairs. So I have 18 chairs in my salon. It's a good size. I can easily have 10 clients in the salon. So if we're only left with 13 car parks in Liverpool Street, what is everyone else going to do? 65% of my customers have a colour service, which means they are in the salon for a minimum of 2.5 hours. And this means that they're using the spaces for longer and contributing towards council revenue. Not only does this impact our day-to-day running of the business, but it will also impact the future value of my business when it's time to come and sell my business. So the reason we all put Liverpool Street instead of, for example, Alexandra Street was because there is available car parking. Can I have the next slide, please? The changing environment and future of Liverpool Street. I don't know if you're aware, but there are 3 sites that have all been earmarked for multi-level apartments with retail underneath. This will bring more people to live in town and more demand on parking. So on Liverpool Street, you've got the old Briscoe's building, which is vacant. Lodge Real Estate, who own that whole corner of Ulster Street and Liverpool Street, when they do it, it's in their plans, they will bring their whole commercial branch up to their branch now, and there will be a demand of another 25 agents who want short-term parking in Liverpool Street. And Lugton's in Victoria Street is also a business that is looking at doing the multi-level apartments and retail. Last slide. Liverpool Street is a very different street than other streets you are considering or have considered. Because of the types of businesses we count on our parking to survive, thrive, and to keep trading. If you took those 16 proposed car parks, more than half, to me, it makes the council look hypocritical on what they're doing, and that revenue gathering, given $22,000 in Liverpool Street, is more important than supporting our local businesses. So it would be very detrimental for us for that to happen. So thank you for your time and consideration. So what questions do you have for me?
All right, thank you very much. I am happy to take some questions, although we've exceeded the time, but councillors?
Apologise. Yes. No.
Have you ever surveyed your customers to see if anyone has ever ridden their bike, walked, caught a bus, or other mode of transport other than car to come to your?
Very, very good point. We do have some clients that work in town and will come to us and walk straight from town to their appointment.
Yep.
Some of the business owners also support us, and we have quite a few, not quite a few, I have, say, 4 clients that live in Hardley and in Liverpool Street at the end, and they would normally walk up. Apart from that, no, I haven't surveyed them. I just know of some clients that have done that.
And then with my own local knowledge of lodge real estate, knowing that those auctions run from 9 till 12, invariably when they can go into negotiations post-auction, so people aren't, and I'm probably, it's not really a question, maybe more an observation, but people will stay longer than 9 till 12 if they're in negotiation on selling a house. So that small window, and I take your point on the Spates Ale House as well, that's well noted.
Well, both of them are not making any demands on it as present. So if a restaurant goes in there and Spates is now up and functioning, then that has demand as well.
And that lodge car park, does that not provide car parks for their staff as well?
So a lot of them, that car park is for a lot of the office-bound staff, but also for clients that are coming to see them.
Yeah.
It's just that when the commercial branch comes through, there's another 25 agents that will be moving up there.
All right, thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yes, and just picking up on the lodge point, they don't have their auctions every day, do they?
No, they have them on Wednesday morning, hence why Joe could have been here
just a
today.
Wednesday. And so what's your observation on Tuesdays, Thursday, Friday, Monday? How is the parking on the street then? I just note that in our report, staff have said it's underutilised.
Yes, area. I know.
Yeah.
It says that.
So,
you know, for me, obviously, we're only open 4 days a week from Tuesday to Friday, so we don't have any demand on it. And also because of COVID and our businesses not running at full speed is what they are, there's probably less car park demand until we're all up, normal people are well and, you know, fully recovered. I was there on Sunday and there were 16 car parks being used on Sunday, which I would think would be a low demand day. On a Sunday, there's not that much open there. So, and out of 29 car parks, there's quite a bit on a low coverage day. So.
And do you notice whether cars are staying there for, I guess you're really busy in your own store with all of the tasks that you complete, but in any observations that you've done in the street, have you noticed that people are stopping for longer than the 2-hour free car parking? Is there turnover or?
To me, there is turnover. Our clients, as I've said, when they come in for a longer service, 2.5 hours or more, then they have to go and, they use their Pay My Park app. So probably we're more at fault with using more than the 2-hour car park, but most of the time they're coming and going with the other clients that are in the street.
Right. Yeah. And there's a number of other businesses. Sorry, I'm wearing my mask today because I've got some bugs and things, so I hope you can hear me okay. There's some other quite sizable car parks around the area, which are not simply on the street.
So the only one, really, the big one that you've got there is the Briscoe's, KFC, sushi, and that's monitored for people that park more than that. I know the manager of Briscoe's, Julian, and he goes through and puts notes on cars that are there or trying to park there all day. Okay. So there is no other car parking in that street, off-street car parking apart from whatever businesses have.
Okay. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I think that's it for now.
Thank you. I just
Chair.
have a couple of questions.
Sure.
In your current lease agreement, do you have a car park? Did you lease some car parks with the building?
Yes, good question. So I have one car park for colours, the building on the corner. So my landlord has the three, what used to be Primo Vino, Sushi and myself. I have one allocated car park, Sushi has one allocated car park, and there's two car parks allocated to the corner building. Because they have been vacant, then I have some car parks in behind, which one of my staff uses. So there's no available car parking for clients, if that's what you're saying.
So just to be clear, so your business model was you would use available car parks for your own staff?
No.
Yourself?
So when I bought the business unit, was the car park was for myself, and then my staff have. At times, I have paid for car parks for them in Princess Street or at the church or even behind Langton's at different times. So I've made sure they've had car parking as opposed to they use the street or anything like that.
Cool. All right. Thank you. That was it. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks for your
That's all.
submission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I think Vicky Lowe-Reed via Zoom is going to be joining us. Hi, Vicky. You might be on mute. There you go. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning.
A very warm welcome. I have you down here for 5 minutes. Obviously, we've got your original submission. So just cover your salient points, and if you could just leave a few minutes for questions. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I won't take long because I don't have much of a voice. So, kia ora koutou. So, ko Vicky Lowe-Reed, Charge Nurse Manager for the Waikato Regional Diabetes Service, Te Whatu Ora Waikato. So our clinic is situated at 26 Clarence Street, which is a cul-de-sac Hamilton City Council proposed to implement the paid all-day parking along one side to benefit commuters into the city. There are 26,000 people with diabetes across the Waikato area, and 6,500 of those are Māori. The Diabetes Clinic provides publicly funded secondary level care services to approximately 100 patients with diabetes per day, many who have mobility issues due to their chronic foot ulcers, amputations, renal failure, or the other disadvantages that come from having a chronic condition. Our clinic only provides 2 mobility parks and 6 patient parks, but please note that 2 of those parks are landlocked and unable to be used. The parking for our patients is very inadequate, and it is a barrier for some people to attend their appointments. It's not uncommon for people to turn around and go home because they couldn't find a car park, which then compromises their health condition. We have leased some parks over at Anytime Fitness, but due to the court also being across the road, they've had to install barrier arms to protect their area. And this system is not always user-friendly for many of our vulnerable patients, and for some, that's too far for them to walk. The Ministry of Health published a document in 2009 called Public Health in New Zealand, Local Government's Contribution to Wellbeing, and this document focuses on the public health roles of local government with a concern for addressing the determinants of health in partnership with the population served. So we would hope that Council will be able to work with us on this issue. We know health is a reflection of an individual or family's socio-economic status, and access to health services and the knowledge and ability to make healthy choices can be often linked to wealth or poverty, and poor health can reduce someone's ability to access services and navigate their way through the many barriers. Our team believe the current 2-hour free parking supports our patients and their whānau to attend their diabetes appointments by ensuring that the vehicles are leaving the area frequently, which frees up parks for others. Most patient appointments are for 1 to 2 hour duration, so this fits nicely and is very welcome. And being free supports our vulnerable population well. If the council implement its parking proposal, it will directly create further barriers for people with diabetes trying to access their healthcare. So we would implore council to leave Clarence Street cul-de-sac parking as it is and to look elsewhere for the commuter parking options. Ngā mihi nui.
Vicky, thank you very much for a very succinct presentation. Obviously, we've also got your written submission here. Councillors, do I have any questions? No. Could we use if you've got a question, could you use your question button? That'd be great.
Done. Vicky, thank you for your presentation and for your well-made points. You mentioned a landlocked car park. I wonder if you could explain a little bit more clearly about what that is and where it's situated, so that we've got a better understanding. Is it just not available to your clients?
Yes, that's correct. So at the back of our building, when we did the extension, we had to provide 6 car parks. But the way the car parks are situated, there's 2 of them that sort of sit right behind the other 2, which means that they're unusable. So if a patient was to park there, they'd be blocked in by the next person parking behind them. So we're really down to 4 parks at the back and 2 mobility parks at the front of the clinic.
Okay. And I also asked a question of the previous submitter with regard to the turnover of car parks. That's a big driver of the change in initiative in this instance, and certainly for Clarence Street. What's your experience of the turnover of the car parks on that particular side of the road? Do you have any experience of that, understanding of it?
Yeah, I do a little bit, because we've had this thing where the receptionists have always been watching car parks, and particularly the ones that are surrounding us, which are tow-away areas, because we have had some patients towed in the past. So we do see that the majority of parks, particularly on our side, the cars move quite frequently. Of course, I'm not out there all the time, so I can't verify that, but we certainly don't see long-term parkers there. They may go over the 2 hours, but they're not there all day.
And not the same car every day, every week?
They would tend to be probably more up the front end towards the courthouse when they do that. Okay. Outside Anytime Fitness or the cafe and the budget car rental place.
Thank you. And just for clarity, you're at number what?
We're 26.
26. That's kind of halfway up, is it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Vicky, I just have a couple of follow-up questions. Just for clarity, I think you said you had 6 usable car parks, or was it 4 in the end?
There's 4 general parks plus 2 mobility.
Right. And staff don't use those? Those are for patients and patients only?
Strictly patient only. Staff do not park on site, and they don't park down the street. They park wherever they can find another park.
Understood. Right. No, that's fine. That was the only clarification I needed. I have no other questions online. Thank you very much for your submission, Vicky.
Thank you very much for hearing me.
Right. Dr. Hugh Litchfield. Sir, nice to see you. I've suddenly realised that I should have actually said that I do know you. You were a physician that have looked after me a couple of times, but I don't think that's a conflict of interest. It's been a number of years. A very well-respected ENT surgeon, I think, Mr. Litchfield. So,
retired.
I'm still here, yes. So a warm welcome, sir. We've got 5 minutes allocated. We have your written submission. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And as you said, my name is Hugh Litchfield. I'm a retired surgeon, mainly at Waikato for much of the time, but we always worked part-time in private. And when I heard about this like one day before the Christmas break, and then again a couple of weeks ago, and I was pretty devastated, and as everyone else in the street would have too. We just heard from Vicky, who are next door to where I am, but it's not so much about me, it's about what goes on in the street. And I want to, you've got my submission, because we think this is totally counterproductive for our services. And I want to make the point that I'm particularly talking about what I call Lower Clarence Street, which is adjacent to the courthouse and area of Clarence Street. It's divided with Tristram Street. And I'm the owner of several buildings in the street, and I just want to spend a minute on outlining why I've had several, like a lot. At the moment I own two of the two main high-rise buildings, about 4,000 square metres of office space. And you might think this is rather strange, but the short answer is parking. But initially, I purchased 16 to 24 Clarence Street, a rundown building, as were many others in that street, I might say, and including a garden centre next door to that, and a very shabby area adjacent to Tristram Street, which was a lovely introduction to Hamilton City from the south, with cars parked all over the place, and a very rundown block of flats, four of them, which I'll mention briefly later. So I bought it so that I could have the ground floor of 16 Clarence Street to do my own surgery in, with room to expand. And I subsequently, I might say, it was the best thing I ever did in the end, because I ended up doing my own stay hospital with about 3,000 general anaesthetic cases. And my whole principle of private, this type of private practice, was to make it affordable. And I ended up doing grommets for Kohanga children with a type of a contract for $350. I think it's probably about $3,000 today. Total. I had a friendly anaesthetist who had the same wish, and this was very rewarding to improve the hearing of mainly little Maori children who could then learn something at school. So, but anyway, so I don't spend too long, but if you get the picture, I bought this building, and it was empty, and I upgraded it and fitted it out so that I could get some tenants in to sort of help with my loan for it, and bit by bit we managed to tenant the building and do it up a bit to make it look better. For a start, for the city. So the parking was over the road, and that was sold. The parking for this building was mainly over the road, and that was sold for Ventura. And I just want to tell you how these sort of areas evolve. When that was sold, I had to buy the next property, and I had the same thing. The building actually wasn't, it was a very expensive building, but it was falling to bits, as it so turned out. And I fixed that. I'm probably going to take a little bit more, because I think this is very, very important. And I don't know why I was only allocated five minutes, if you don't mind, but I won't be too long. But then, and so bit by bit, I bought the next place and tidied that up. And what I'm getting around to saying is that this area is for, and I won't be much longer, this area is for essential services for the people of the Waikato and Hamilton. And it's health, and it's legal and health services. The psychiatric service down there, and they were horrified to think that we were going to lose half our car parks, short-term parking. And we need short-term parking, and my presence in that area, and the same with the legal services, they are also, I have 100 car parks, and we provide for staff and lawyers coming and going, and we have handicap persons car parks, and but one by one, I've had to buy another building because it had parking associated. That's why I've got 100 car parks. But we really can, the concept of having all-day parking, it will not be available to these essential services at our street, which are health. Older people, I run a hearing aid business, the same thing, to try and make hearing aids affordable for the hearing aids that work are affordable for older people. And these are people who like to be dropped off outside the door. So if you would please consider, this is different. I think there was mention of Clarence Street being one of the areas. Maybe the top part of Clarence Street is different, but this is a really important health-related disability assistance area. So thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no questions. Colleagues? Any questions online? Councillor Martin? No? Thank you very much for your succinct explanation.
Thank you very much.
Right, moving on to now. I understand we've got the Moncton Charitable Trust present. Hello. From what I understand is you didn't want to speak. You've got a written submission. You are prepared to take questions if any of the elected members have questions. Have I summarised that fairly?
Jeff was hoping to come and speak, but tested positive for COVID yesterday. So.
Oh, that's no good. Wish him.
Written submission stacked.
Okay, wish him a speedy recovery from us. Colleagues, do I have any questions? We've got your written submission and it's quite clear. No, go ahead if you've got one, Councillor Mark.
I think mine might be directed at Evelisa later.
Okay,
Yep.
That's fine. All right, so in which case that brings the submissions to an end. Robin, I wonder if you would mind grabbing a seat, because I have a feeling a lot of elected members will have quite a few questions of yourself. Maybe you could give us a bit of a broad introduction, update us on any of the changes that may have occurred, and any of your feedback from the submissions that you've now heard and also have read, and then we'll open it up for questions. Robin.
Thank you, Councillor. Good morning, everyone. So yes, the first topic that we have in front of us is for parking restrictions and the traffic bylaw changes. So I'm intending to work through that one and then move on later to the speed one, noting that Peter Boss's submission was on the speed, so I'll just put that on hold, I guess, for some time. For the parking report, I think the key things to note here is that we have, since the time of writing the report, received further information from submitters, some of which is included as written submission in the reports, in the attachments to this diligent report, and some we've heard from today. In regard to the pay and stay all day, I guess the key point that is different to what was included in the report was on page 19, paragraph 38. At the time of writing the report, the indication from the private off-street parking provider, which was Moncton Trust, was that they weren't in support. We've had further discussions with them, and as has been noted today, based on those discussions and points noted in their submission, they are now happy to support that. So just for the committee's information, that was a change. I guess the other point to note is that...
Sorry, Robin, just for clarification, that's page 19?
Correct, paragraph 38.
Paragraph 38. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So to talk generally about the pay and stay all day, or commuter parking as we've noted, this has had a long gestation period. It was something that was originally discussed and put through as an annual plan, long-term plan suggestion. And on page 16, clauses 21, 22, etc., there's a little bit of the history as to how we've ended up with these proposed sites. And a note that that was worked through via the Infrastructure Operations Committee. So I guess the role of this committee was really to work through the formalisation of that. As we've noted previously, we did have delays. COVID, again, had created the delays for actually getting this rolled out, and those delays were in regard to getting the consultation material out, and then subsequently being able to work through the issues that we had, the items that have been raised. And so we have continued to try and work with those people who came back to us in the first round of consultation. And there were 2 sites implemented in July, which were both Nisbet and Knox Street. So they're currently out operating under this regime. So that's left us the remaining streets. And as you've heard today, in the case of Liverpool and Clarence, we do have submitters who have concerns about that proposal.
Right. Okay,
but
thank
otherwise,
you.
I'm happy to take questions.
So what I intend to do is I'm going to give elected members opportunities to speak specifically or ask questions about a particular street, if they have. And I guess I'm going to take it by exception. So if there are no questions, I'm assuming we're comfortable. If there are questions, we can have a discussion about it, and if we want to move amendments, we can. I have an initial question, Robin, just to help me with some historical context. So each of these locations, pretty much, including Liverpool and Clarence Street, historically, they did have parking meters at one stage, did they?
Yes, they did.
Yes.
Right. And there was a decision a number of years ago. Could you just remind me how many years ago we then decided to introduce what was the...
It would only be about 2 or 3.
Right, okay.
That we had the 2-hour, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah, the 2-hour thing has really been good. Because
Right.
the services need that sort of thing.
Okay, right. Thank you. Right. Colleagues, do we have any questions of Robin? Councillor Van Oosten?
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. I'm thinking of Liverpool Street, and part of the reason for the introduction of the pay and stay was that it was underutilised. We've heard the submitters today talk about the work that was happening at Spates and the vacant lot on the corner where Primo Vino was. In your opinion, does that mitigate any of the issue to do with the underutilisation of the parking that council believe was the reason to introduce that in the first place?
So I would note that the decision for choosing these streets was made in August 2021.
Yes.
And that was based on data that had been prior to that. So although the Spates Ale House has been going through changes, it's primarily since that decision was made.
Okay, right, okay. And so those businesses were, or at least the Spates Ale House was working.
Was operational at
Would the
that time.
time of day or the use of those businesses have any bearing on the use of the parking? I'm thinking particularly of Spates, when generally it's busy in the afternoons and evenings.
Yeah, so the data that we will have used will be the sort of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. sort of period. Reality is we're probably more interested to 8 till 5 p.m. Is the period that we look at for that occupancy turnover.
General business hours. And I guess last question there is, should the park and stay be introduced if people wanted to stay for 2 hours and go again? That's a possibility, is that correct?
Yes. So I guess under the current regime, the 2 hours free. If you want to stay for a subsequent period, that gets charged at $6 an hour. So if you then move to the pay and stay all day regime, you can stay as long as you wish and have paid $6.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Doctor, no, that's not how these types of...
I've never noticed it not fully utilised, but that was prior to COVID. I mean, and I have to say that our experience of all-day parking, which we had originally, was that it's not available for those in the street. And secondly, if somebody you can't come and go from an all-day park. You might pay the $6, but you won't find it when you come back. And I've never noticed underutilisation of those parks. People come and go. That's the whole point of business.
No, I don't think they were suggesting that somebody who would pay the $6 would treat it as a come and go. What was suggested is they could pay the $6, stay the 2 hours, and then depart.
Yes. Make it available.
Correct. And I think what Maxine was alluding to was in the Liverpool Street case, the average person was staying more than the 2 hours anyway, because a lot of the treatments were 2.5 hours. So in theory, they could have been charged $6 for that last half an hour.
They were supposed to be. Why weren't they?
Well, they would have been. The processes would work that way. Anyway, Councillor, seat 12. So have you not got your card in? There you go.
Yep.
Councillor Mark.
My question may have just been answered, because I just had a question for Robin around the demand responsive pricing that we talk about. It's in summary and recommendations on page 20, paragraph 46. But I think you may have just covered it by what you said. My question, if I was to ask it in my clearest possible terms, is what is demand responsive pricing? Just so I understand.
Yes, so the idea of demand responsive pricing is being able to change the price to park there in a location depending on the demand. So if you've got a street, for example, and we'll start with where we are today,
Yep.
Proposing $6
Yep.
For a day's parking.
Yep.
If we find that we are getting 100% parking there all of the time, then we could consider raising the price. And if we've got a location where no one is parking, then we could consider lowering the price. That would still require a process that council would need to agree to on what the basis of those changes. It is a process that's used overseas quite a lot, and it's just really a signal for that as a potential for these types of car parks in the future. At this stage, there's not an intention to have that in place.
Okay. And if there was, would that make our $6 pay and stay redundant?
So it would change, I guess, the offering on that street. So it may be that some streets stay at $6, some may be $7 or $8, for example, some may be $3 or $4. It would really, and that would be where you're starting to kind of test the market and the demand for these areas. And, you know, it may be that in some cases you actually decide that it's not a appropriate location for that pay and stay all day. I guess, you know, parking is one of those things that is forever changing.
Yeah.
And that is a reflection on the fact that the adjacent businesses and their needs are also changing. So that's always, I guess that's why we have so many changes come through this committee, is trying to keep up with that and to have that flexibility.
And if we had a format like that, then I'd imagine there'd be livery or messaging that says this area is not $6 a day, it's a variable.
Yes, and so that would all be part of that process, and the fact that it's all done via the app would mean that it's also very easy for the user to actually understand the choices that they're making, where they're choosing to park and the costs.
Does the app have a built-in function to say there's parking in this area at the moment, or who's our?
Yes.
Yep, okay. That's handy.
Robin, just a couple of follow-up questions, if I could, Councillor Matt.
Yeah.
Just remind me historically the revenue from the meters we used to run in Hamilton. This move to free parking, what does it cost the city currently, the 2 hours free in lost revenue?
I believe it's in the order of $1 million. Was that the?
It's gone from.
Could you come up? Thank you.
The free parking has moved us from $1.5 million in metre per year to about $10,000 a month. So, yeah, it's cost us about 1.4.
So $1.4 million is the cost to the ratepayer to have removed the meters and provide the 2 hours free parking.
I believe, though, that there is an additional rate that has been put in place in the CBD.
$147,000 of targeted rate for businesses.
I'm just trying to get.
Our rates were increased for that.
Right. I'm just trying to get some context here. So we had 1.5 million in revenue historically. We've now have approximately 100,000 in revenue.
Yes.
10,000 a month.
Yes.
And we've had an additional revenue of 140,000 from an increased level of tax. So,
Per annum.
So per annum. So the ratepayers are subsidising the 2 hour free parking by the vicinity of about $1.3 million.
No, $147,000 per annum. So total.
Yeah. So all right. For clarity, I understood you to say that the figure was 1.5 million was historic.
There was parking meter revenue was generated about $1.5 million per annum.
Thank you. Then I thought somebody said to me that currently it's now just 10,000 a month.
Per month, so $110,000 a year.
And I also understood that you said that we increased a tax that generated approximately 140,000?
Per annum.
So would we agree that we had 1.5, we now have 240 odd thousand, 250,000?
Correct.
So roughly, the ratepayer is subsidising it by 1.2.
Simply on revenue, yes.
Okay, thank you. And of course, with that being said, now we're beginning to try to increase the revenue, because that was an instruction of this committee at the long-term plan, and this is the implementation of it. And of course, whenever there's been something for nothing, when we go to change, clearly there is some discomfort. So could you remind me what we're projecting in revenue from this new change, once it's all up and running?
Yeah, on page 16, there's a table under clause 26 that has that detail.
Right. Okay. Would be really helpful if there was a total. Who did that?
Guilty.
Okay. 244. And of course, we would still have the 140 and the addition from the additional tax focused on the local businesses to help subsidise the free parking, and the other 100,000, so would be back up, right? So, okay. Still a million being subsidised by the ratepayer. Okay. Do you have any other questions, Mark? Councillor Mark? Councillor Martin.
Thank you. My questions are not specifically about Liverpool or Clarence, and obviously I assume we'll be discussing that further. The submissions were quite clear and concise, and I thank submitters for their comprehensive submission. It just comes down to Grantham Street. Just please be patient with me. And I'm not necessarily opposing this at all, and I see the logic. But with the regional theatre eventually opening, and of course, as you know, they've done a significant pitch for daytime. They've said they're going to do school prize givings, a whole lot of community stuff, so that there would be potentially significant daytime operations. Now, in the sense that the theatre, if I look at retail, are we sort of running a sort of a constant monitoring of how the once the theatre is opened, how that would impact on parking demand in the area? And why I say that, I get it that if you stay more than 2 hours, it's $6 anyway, all right? So it's cost neutral, but what obviously commuter parking tells me is that people who want to stay the whole day and work in the area will occupy that particular space. So it's not an issue of price, it's an issue of actually available of a space for 2 or 3 hours.
So, yes, I guess the short answer to that question is yes, there will be monitoring. We are always monitoring the parking stock and the turnover of that, and as and when the theatre get operational, then we will certainly be having a look at the impact and the parking demands that come from that. So
you have, I know that with our river precinct as well, you know, the ferry bank, the new proposals, at the moment, as things currently are, you're saying that that's still realistic to allocate that stretch for all-day commuter parking, but when the theatre opens and other things develop, you'd be monitoring it. Is that right?
Correct.
Obviously, that would include the Celebrating Age Centre.
Yes, the Celebrating Age Centre is, I think most of the parking occurs on Victoria Street for that. It certainly will be more accessible given the level difference there is between Grantham Street and Victoria Street.
So I guess what I'm asking too is as parts of the CBD may change, all right, in terms of what happens there with the retail, theatre, Celebrating Age, then obviously we have a commuter parking for now, but that wouldn't preclude it going back into a more short-term situation if there was clear demand.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you've got the answer to your question, Martin.
Yes, no, I have. Thank you very much. And I'll preserve, no doubt we'll be discussing further the submissions re Clarence Street and Liverpool.
Okay. Colleagues, do you have any other questions relating to any of the other streets that we'll cover? And then prior to, let me explain how I intend to try to manage this. If there was a desire to move any amendments to remove a particular street from the proposal, I think the best way of doing that would be to send it back to the Infrastructures Committee, reminding ourselves that the council chose at a 10-year plan to try to regenerate some revenue that we had lost in implementing the 2-hour free parking. And it set a figure, I think of $500,000 a year, and it was supposed to have commenced a year or so ago. Sorry, Evelisa, have I got that wrong?
Yes, so just to confirm, the annual plan in, I believe, it's COVID 2021, introduced the current commuter parking zones that are being discussed today with a revenue of, an additional revenue anticipated of $400,000 per annum. The 10-year plan then, council decided to include the city fringe, so additional commuter parking options on the outskirts of the central city area. That was to commence from charging from year 3 onwards with additional revenue of $500,000, and then from year 4 onwards, the anticipated revenue was $1 million.
Right.
So in total, over the 10 years, it was a revenue of 7.5 million anticipated revenue with the changes decided through the 10-year plan.
And just for clarity, we're currently a little behind, aren't we?
Yes, we are very behind due to the COVID impacts on us.
So the function of this committee is subservient to the overall council and subservient to the infrastructure committee. However, that does not negate our ability as elected members to articulate a strong narrative and send it back for all of council to reconsider. So that's how I intend to manage that process. So as a result, there will be, part of the motion will be to agree to a number of the streets, and by exception, if there was a will to send that back to the higher committee for them to relitigate, right? So does anybody have, staff, is that a practical way of implementing this?
If it pleases the chair, could I also make a comment that this isn't all around revenue, that what we're looking at is pretty sophisticated methods of picking up parking behaviours, and we find that in a number of these streets, the behaviours that we're seeing and the need for the parking doesn't match the existing restrictions in those streets. And, you know, like we look at, if we look at the vacancy and the overstays in across all of these streets that we've put up, we've got the lowest one of about 64% is either overstaying or unoccupied. So there's a number of factors we took, and it wasn't all about revenue. It was about providing customers appropriate types of parking in different locations to meet the customers' requirements. And some of these locations, including Liverpool Street, was started up with the request of staff finding they were running out to actually feed meters where they were staying all day to avoid parking tickets. So there was a call at that time to provide some kind of all-day parking in those vicinities. And like people have already said, it's very easy for us to turn things over if we find there's a change in need in these areas. You know, it's a bit of paint on the road and bits and pieces. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. I guess my question to both of you was, are you comfortable with the process that I've outlined in terms of, I mean, I have no idea if any of my colleagues are going to try to move an amendment. I'm simply trying to agree upon a process to resolve the meeting today. So
I think we're talking particularly about the pay and stay all day or the commuter parking, and that process is appropriate.
Correct. That's all we're talking about currently, because I have not turned my mind, nor has this committee, to item 6.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Okay? So on that basis, you're agreeing that this is a pragmatic process to follow?
Yes.
Evelisa, do you have a concern with it?
No.
Thank you. Right, colleagues, is there an appetite from any of you? Wonderful. Councillor Donovan.
I have a quick...
So I think you've got to stand by, Councillor Martin. Councillor Donovan, are your questions, or is it a procedural to move an amendment?
No, it was a question, but having now heard your narrative, I don't know if it's in the right context. It's just confusing. It bugged me when I read the report, and I'm referring to the Moncton Charitable Trust submission, page 101, point 4, it says the MCT will make available to HCC its schedule of car park prices when requested. This might not be appropriate for this time, but can I just ask this question?
Sure, go ahead and ask the question.
My question is, in the commercial world, that would be perceived as collusion, would it not?
Staff, do you want an attempt to answer that question?
Or am I off track because I'm just trying to overthink it? I just know that you're not allowed to share pricing when it comes to setting rates and stuff.
I think for this hearing, it's probably not relevant.
Good. That was my question. The second question was, is it relevant and meaningful? Can I play the new card still?
Yes, you can still play the recently elected new card.
Yeah.
Evelisa, do you want to make a comment?
In terms of all of council's funding and revenue, fees and charges are available to the public and are open to the public.
Yep.
Should a private parking operator wish to share their fees with us, most of them are available on boards outside of their parking facilities.
Yep.
In terms of appropriateness, in terms of working together, I'm unable to comment on that because I've never experienced that, but it is something that as a committee, council will decide what our process is in that instance.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Martin, was yours a procedural or a question?
Question, really, just,
Okay.
just so I've got this right.
So just wait, Councillor Martin. Councillor Maxine?
Mine's a question also.
Great, go ahead.
Thank you.
But you were on the list first.
Yeah, thank you. And Robin, in the report, you mention Nisbet and Knox Street and the introduction there. I'm just trying to recall what the feedback was prior to the introduction of those pay and stays. Did we have a similar resistance from residents and businesses around and in that area?
No, the reason why we chose those two were that we hadn't had any negative feedback and that we needed time to work through the feedback that we had on the remaining sites. A lot of the feedback was questions, just trying to understand how it would work and that sort of thing. So we basically took the time to be able to work through that to bring the second tranche to you. So we didn't have anything like this for.
Okay. And just in terms of where they are and the area that they serve, are they markedly different to the areas that we're looking to introduce here? I mean, in terms of the number of businesses it might service or the kind of activity that might be around those areas.
So I would say yes, Nisbet Street in itself was a bit of a strange one. It went through a number of years where it wasn't sure whether it was going to remain a council asset, whether it was going to be a Wintec asset. So it didn't actually have any restrictions attached to it. I think the people that actually park in that location, and some of them were my colleagues, they had to get there at 7 a.m. in the morning because there was nothing within the city that was completely all-day unrestricted parking so close to the CBD. And I suppose the lack of complaints has been that people have always been aware that at some stage this is going to change. And talking to some of the people that actually use those parks, they would drive down Nisbet Street, see if there was a free park by the time they were coming to work, and if there wasn't, they would then come and park in the Garden Place car park and pay the all-day fee.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess my next question then is to Evelisa with regard to the enforcement and the number plate recognition that we've recently introduced, and how that might be able to give us good information and data about the use of car parks, etc., and the overstays.
So if through the chair I can pass that on to John as the expert in
very good.
that.
Thanks, John.
So in terms of a very good question and our new technology that we are deploying.
Yeah, sure. So we also have in-ground sensors that this information was passed, was put through on. Robin alluded to that. This actually predated COVID. And when we selected the spaces, so for all of the spaces that we've put up here, we've looked at the occupancy of those spaces, we've looked at the vacancy of those spaces, and we've looked at the overstaying of the existing restrictions that are in those areas and selected these places. So when we look at the monitoring in the future, we've been sure that whenever we talk to businesses around putting long stay or all day parking in the vicinity, that we would use the licence plate recognition cars to make sure that, one, the people that have parked in the long stay parks have parked, but also we would manage the areas adjacent to those long stay parks to make sure that the other parking was managed to the restrictions that were there, so that they did turn over, because we end up having pressure on us as far as the resources to get the wardens into those areas, and now that we've got the capability to get out, we will manage the other parking to make sure that it stays within the restrictions that have been posted by this committee.
And that by doing that, that could meet some of the parking need for shorter term stays that have been raised at this meeting today.
Absolutely. So if we even look at Liverpool Street, we look at an overstay of 54%. So the vacancies and the overstays equals 67% in that street, and that's between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on business days.
Okay.
So the information we get is quite comprehensive.
And that's kind of real time.
Absolutely.
And up to date.
Yep.
Information that you have now. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Councillor,
thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, sorry, as usual, be patient with me, Mr. Chair. As I understand it, there's two separate issues. One is whether or not we send Liverpool and Clarence Street and not make a decision today back to the drawing board, or just help me, Mr. Chair, you're saying that if we have a different view, that is elevated back up to the infrastructure committee?
Yeah, so what I'm about to do is I'm going to move the motion, the recommendation on page 9, but before I was going to move it, I was going to ask if any elected members wanted to take a specific street out. And if they were to take the specific street out, then I would put those aside, move the motion, and then open the floor for other elected members to speed this up. Councillor Martin, what I'm going to do is ask for a signal now from any elected member who's interested in moving an amendment on any particular street. And then I'm going to move the balance, and then I'm going to go back to that elected member to hear their amendment, or to hear the new motion of how they would like to handle the streets that they're concerned about.
Yeah, yes, well, I'd certainly suggest that we would take out Liverpool and Clarence and then have a further discussion. The rest seems straightforward. In terms of funds and finance, this is the question. I take it really, we're not questioning at all the principle of commuter parking, whether that's in Ruakiwi Road. It's a matter of where eventually that is rolled out to, and there's going to be further rollouts, obviously Ruakiwi Road, other places, Mill Street. What's happened here to our staff is presumably you've, in terms of demand, identified a tranche of streets that is actually to be eligible for the first part of the commuter parking rollout, but it is not obviously going to stop there as we extend this.
Councillor Martin, I think you've asked that question and they've answered it before, but for clarity, you're asking staff, is the streets that are recommended in the report based on thorough live dynamic analysis, and that is your recommendation? Is that your question to staff?
You're brilliant, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Right.
As usual, you're brilliant.
Staff,
Yes.
would you like to answer Councillor Martin's question?
Yes, at the time of making the recommendation of these sites in August 2021 to the Infrastructure Ops Committee, that was based on that data, and the data that we have since had still supports that. And I think the second part of that question was, is this the only ones we're going to do? No, the fringe parking is a further initiative that will follow as well.
And if I can be bold, I think Councillor Martin was also asking, will you continue to monitor the streets that we're implementing? And if things change, would you then bring it back to us for further consideration?
Yes, and I think the other thing worth noting is that we do respond to requests from businesses and shop owners and that sort of thing to kickstart that review process as well, if necessary.
And to remove any doubt, after hearing the verbal submissions this morning, this is important to me, Robin and John, you're saying you would not be changing your current recommendation on the list starting on page 9. Have I understood that correct?
I would be, if it pleases the chairs, I would be supporting to continue with this, and you would find that a number of the people in those areas would find the security of a long stay park would be preferable instead of infringements being given in that area, including people getting haircuts and things like that.
Understood. Okay. Thank you. So I think, Councillor Martin, are you comfortable? Yeah. Has that answered your question?
No, I'm going to ask that Liverpool and Clarence be removed from the recommendations, and then we can obviously have a discussion as to whether or not we proceed with the staff recommendation with regard to those specific streets, or whether in fact we go back for some further consultation on that.
All right. I'm just trying to find a pragmatic way of doing this. I'm open to staff suggestion. Am I best to move the balance of the recommendations on page 9, and then if Councillor Martin has a seconder, to then move Clarence Street and Liverpool back to the Infrastructures Committee?
Correct.
I've just got a question with regard to that. Sorry, I'm having a coughing attack as well. Should they be returned to the Infrastructure Operations Committee? Is that committee then able to make the final decision on it, or would they be sending it back to us for that final decision?
No,
they'll have the discussion.
They would make
the decision.
From my understanding, Narelle, how would you?
So they could make the same decision on locations. It's the traffic panel that has the delegations to set the register changes.
Yes.
So the actual implication of the parking on street. So it would either need to come back here. The other alternative would be that it went to full council after infrastructure for that decision.
Sorry, the other.
So timeline-wise, there is the ability to go to the August Infrastructure Ops Committee, and they can give direction at their choice, either to go up to council or to come to the 8th of September meeting of this panel again.
Okay, so staff, look, I'm needing real clarity here, because I think what Narelle has explained to me is slightly different to what I'd understood. If what Narelle has just articulated is this council in its wisdom has delegated the decision-making process in its entirety to the implementation of this to this committee. And so I'm now beginning to wonder why I would send it back to another committee, who then would turn around and say, I'm sending it back to this committee because that's the delegated. So I'm going to make a ruling on that. We're going to make the decision today, because it's now very clear that in fact is what the will of council was when it chose to set up the terms of reference to this committee. Have I misunderstood that?
Mr. Chair, I don't want to I'll accept your ruling. What I would say that
Sorry,
when
Councillor Martin, I'll come to you as a question. I wasn't asking for your opinion on that. I was asking for staff's opinion. I'm sorry. Evelisa, as GM, what is your understanding as to the terms of reference of this committee?
So my understanding in the terms of reference of this committee, the Infrastructure Operations Committee has, by resolution, approved the streets to be implemented as commuter parking zones, subject to the traffic panel approval of those streets. So my recommendation would be that we either refer back to the Infrastructure Operations Committee to confirm that, to then come back, or I'm just seeking clarification, is there an opportunity to defer the decision on those two streets from today to the September committee as another option?
So, for clarity, so infrastructure has already made the decision, but they then send it to us as a panel to finally make the decision. So I would have assumed that we make the decision whether it's our jurisdiction to make the decision. Because
Yes, and apologies, this is where, this is the first time I'm going through this type of thing. So in terms of, I'm just looking at Narelle in terms of the terms of reference, which was the question that you asked for this committee and what that delegation is. But, and then I would just need to seek just some advice, if we could, for 5 minutes, if you're unclear.
For clarity, because and we might need to get that advice, because I think what you're saying is, in fact, we would make a decision today that approves the streets that we approve, and we would decline the other two streets, and then the infrastructure committee could then make its own decision whether or not they would like to have another look at it. Because the current terms of reference enables us to make the decision. It doesn't enable us to not make a decision. We've got to either make a decision. So do you want to get the city solicitor or somebody to verify? Okay.
If I could request that, because I would really like to get this right.
So would I.
Yeah.
So I'm going to adjourn for 15 minutes until 11:15 for staff to enable a chat with the city solicitor to make sure that we're not ultra vires. So we'll come back at 11:15. but we needed to get from City Solicitor some legal guidance. I'm very comfortable, having heard the advice and guidance, that this committee is the decision-making committee, and so I'm comfortable with that. Now, what I intend to do is I intend to move the staff's recommendation on page 9. And I understand Councillor Martin is considering an amendment. And my understanding is his amendment would be to move all streets with the exception of, I think, Liverpool and Clarence Street. Councillor Martin, is that my understanding?
Right, so obviously I've just tuned in now, and I just want to be crystal clear is that you've received the advice to the effect that this panel obviously has to make the decision, or it is not an option to refer it to the operations, to your senior committee.
Correct. So, correct. So what would happen is we would either approve or decline its entirety or part thereof, and we would simply note to the Infrastructure Committee that was our decision. Correct.
Well, my amendment, and I realise staff will love me for this, that we hold over the Liverpool and Clarence Street, and that staff come back to us at our appropriate meeting to see if there can be some modification to that.
No, that wouldn't be quite. You would simply be declining to approve Liverpool and Clarence Street.
At this point.
Correct. And you wouldn't be instructing staff to do further work. It would be up to either council in its entirety or the Infrastructure Committee, if it chose to look at other alternatives and ask staff for further. But we would simply be either improving or declining. So, Councillor Martin, do you have a seconder for your amendment? Well, I guess I'll move the staff's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? So staff's recommendation on page 9 is moved, seconded by myself, seconded by Councillor Maxine. Councillor Martin, your amendment is to approve all streets other than Liverpool and Clarence. Who's going to second?
I have a question before I...
Go ahead.
To Eva Lisa. Now, the impact of that is, I would assume to the General Manager that gives you options to go back and review those 2 streets we've removed to see if there's an alternative or further work to be done with the property owners and the, and I use the word retailers, including the health providers as well in that area. Eva Lisa, can you just give me some guidance? What would be the potential impact of my amendment?
Councillor Gallagher, what you have just said is correct. That it doesn't, it means that it's declined if that is so resolved, and then further work can continue. It doesn't eliminate staff from looking at what other opportunities we can do in the street for parking, working alongside the businesses.
So the word I'm saying is, obviously I'm saying declined at this point. I can have that in debate, but my simple amendment is that we just remove those 2 streets from the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donovan, are you seconding?
Yeah, just a procedural question, if I may. If I second Martin's motion, amendment, we can debate on that.
Correct.
Yes.
And you don't, you could use the term "I'm seconding" Councillor Martin's to get it on the floor.
That's it. That's what I was going for.
Pro forma, or to get it on the floor.
Those were the words I was
and then
looking
that enables.
Yes, please.
For the debate. So
I'm seconding Martin's motion.
So I have the motion as recommended by staff, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Maxine. I have an amendment from Councillor Gallagher, seconded by Councillor Donovan, which is to approve all streets with the exception of Liverpool and Clarence. I think, Narelle?
And if we could add to note that those two streets were declined
Understood.
to the Infrastructure Committee.
In the amendment, there would be a notation that would clearly say Liverpool and Clarence Street has been declined, and that we bring this to the attention of Angela's committee. Are you comfortable with that? So that's now on the board. Does anybody have any questions of either the motion or the amendment before I open it for broader questions to staff?
So if I may, through the chair, the question would be that obviously, obviously if the amendment was successful, the Ops Committee would receive this, and then obviously Eva Lisa would update that committee in terms of the next steps and what staff we're looking at doing. Is that correct?
Councillor Martin, that question has now been answered 3 times. I'm trying to be tolerant. There will not be another question on this point. We've answered it 3 times for you. So, sir, correct. The decision would be, if the amendment is successful, that Liverpool and Clarence Street is declined, and that we note that to the Infrastructures Committee. And the Infrastructures Committee could then decide to ask staff to do further work. They would then still have to follow their own terms of reference that would send, after any work having been done, back to this panel to reconsider, because we're the ones with the delegated authority decision making.
Thank you for your helpful advice.
Excellent. Right, the motion's been moved. There's an amendment. I'm now happy to take a speaking list. I guess I will, as the mover, of the motion, I will speak first. Look, I've heard the public submissions, and I feel the concerns that you've articulated. I fully accept that COVID and the current trading conditions have been incredibly challenging. But I am swayed by the fact that, in general, staff have shown us that in at least Liverpool Street's position, that in excess of 50% of the infringements have been as a result of people staying more than the 2 hours allocated, and that the fine that they will, or the parking offence that they would have committed, is the equivalent of $6. And so I believe, in fact, that setting up a park and pay system of $6 that enables someone to stay 1 hour, 2 hours, or in fact 8 hours, is an equitable solution to what is a complex parking challenge that the city faces. I'm mindful that the council over the last 3 or 4 years have tried to enable and promote the CBD by introducing the 2 hours free. And it's free to the user, but not to the ratepayer. And the ratepayer and the businesses have had to subsidise this. And council, in its wisdom, has seen a need to try to change that paradigm and to start slowly changing back to the stage where you park in a city, there is a cost to parking. I note that we are a way away from ever getting back to the revenue that we had once. And so, on balance, when I look at equity, in my opinion, the staff's recommendation is fair. And so that's why I support the staff's recommendation. I will now call upon Councillor Martin, who has the mover of the amendment. Martin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly acknowledge particularly the broader issue that around the real opportunity cost in terms of everything comes with a cost around the free parking. I note that. I am of the view that in the rollout of commuter parking, there has to be a degree of nimbleness, and the evidence that's been presented to me today by the submitters has personally persuaded me that we need a relook at this to see if in fact we need to review both Clarence and Liverpool Street. For what it's worth, I think it's very useful that the parent committee at least have an oversight of this, as would be the case when the minutes go up or are noted there. But I think all I want is this to be looked at again, and I think there is a nimbleness needed with regard to these two streets, and I think the submitters have adequately stated the reasons why, but obviously I respect the majority of the panel.
Councillor Maxine.
Thank you. I take my decision-making powers in this meeting really seriously, and I thank our submitters today for your genuine and well-reasoned submissions, and I think that you offer some really good arguments for us to consider. And I'd expect nothing less. You know, you are well respected in the community and offer great services to our city, on the fringe of our city, and that's where our problem begins, because from the data that we've seen presented by staff, it shows that there's more than just your clients using the streets that are outside your businesses, and that's a worry for our whole city. It's a worry also because there's further growth that's going to be happening in those fringes and within the city as well, and that's going to put even more pressure on our car parking. And you don't have to go far around the city to be able to see the way that car owners use our streets. They're parking on verges, they're double parking, they're parking on yellow lines, they're overstaying in areas, they are parking in a way that is very much their own interests at heart, and they don't think necessarily of the businesses that you run, the services that you provide, or other parkers or other people using the streets. And so it comes to us to be able to make really difficult decisions, and I see this as being a really difficult decision because it's about change as well, and change isn't always welcomed in our city. But we've got really good data, not just from 2021, but you've heard John say today, even up to today, to support that people are staying in areas without paying, without thinking about others who might want to use those car parks. And I think that sends a very clear signal to me that something has to change. And this is a really great way for us to be able to advance the opportunity for people who do want to park all day, to allow them to do that in a legal way, in a way that also supports other activities within the city. I recall also the decision making at the time when we decided to bring in the opportunity for commuter parking, that the funding would be allocated to other modal shift, supporting other initiatives around the city. And I'm staying my course with that vision and with the vision of the Infrastructure Operations Committee along those lines. So I will be supporting the inclusion of Clarence Street and Liverpool Street at this stage. I am heartened, though, that we do have the opportunity for review. So if for any reason perverse outcomes are happening, we'll be able to amend that and make changes accordingly. Kia ora, and thank you.
Councillor Donovan.
Thank you, Chair. When I was reading this report, I had music going in the background. That was one of my favourite songs in the kind of 80s growing up was Pump Up the Volume. And there's a line in it where it says Mars needs more women. And often when I've been parking in town, I've thought that Mars needs more parking attendants because I've been a victim of fines for overstaying and whatnot. So, look, my point is behaviours are difficult to change, and we're going through a process at the moment where we're trying to change behaviours of certain people. I think, and I agree with Martin, based on the very persuasive submissions that we've heard today from, from the public, there's some real evidence there to suggest that, hey, maybe we do just need to tweak this a little bit right now because it might not be quite right. There's not a one-size-fits-all type answer. I take on board what my fellow councillor Maxine has said, though, with the ability to change. I think that shows a flexibility. But my concern, if being completely honest, is, what do the optics look like in terms of wider ratepayer view on this, where they're going to pick up on the, picking on small businesses in town when the very thing we're trying to do is encourage, small businesses to do well. So I probably sound a little bit like I might be sitting on the fence, but I will support Martin with his amendment because I have heard enough today that says to me we've got to take a look through a lens of being fair and equitable to everyone and not one size fits all. So that's where I sit.
Thank you. I'll have a brief right of reply and then we'll put the amendment. From my point of view, when we talk about equity, we need to be mindful of the significant infrastructural cost of providing car parks. Millions and millions of dollars a year of maintaining car parks, and that is historically funded by ratepayers and a small contribution by businesses in Hamilton through not only their rates but also through targeted central city rates. A decision a few years ago to try to help rejuvenate the CBD, this council said, actually, we're going to pass the burden back to the ratepayers and they're going to pick up the heavy lifting of 1.5 million a year to try to help small businesses in the CBD, and we've been doing that for 4 years. As a consequence of that, there is now quite an habitual habit of assuming you'll always be able to drive into the CBD and park for a couple of hours. That's uncommon in a lot of large cities around the world, but I think it certainly did some benefit for a period of time. And now this council is moving in a direction that's saying we have to rebalance who pays for some of this. And I think council made the right decision in its annual plan. And although I am moved by the evidence that I've heard from some of the submitters, particularly those using the diabetes facilities, I'm also mindful that Knott Street Park, which is very, very close, within sort of 250 metres, is $4 for 1 hour. And I'm also very mindful that you could park in these streets for an entire 8-hour day and pay only $6. And so I think on balance, the move here is not unfair. So that said, I intend to, we'll put the amendment first. Now, we will use our voting system. So the amendment, we'll put that up, and I'm having to remind myself how to do this. Here we go. No, not now, I'm sorry. No. I'm happy to have a discussion afterwards, but we can't at the midst of a voting process. No. Okay, so why is our system not... Martin, we've got your vote. You are working perfectly. It's just perfect. Okay. So let's, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go by hands rather than that. So those in favour of the amendment, raise your hand. So, and those against, raise their hands.
The amendment is hung. The chair has a casting vote.
So I will vote to implement the staff's recommendations.
You need to vote against the amendment again.
Okay, so I'm voting against the amendment.
And now move to your...
Now I'm moving the substantial motion. All those in favour say aye. Those against?
The substantial motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Right, now moving on to item 6. Robin, this is the city speed limit bylaw.
Thank you, Chair. So, just briefly, the speed limit changes that are proposed in this report are basically for 4 key locations. One is the Hefe Terrace shops, one is the greater Mahoe Street area, which includes the Tawa Street area that Peter Boss submitted on earlier this morning. And then we have Ruakura Road and the intersection of Cobham Drive and Tristram Street. So all of these proposed changes are in accordance with our current speed management plan and are also in accordance with the draft speed management plan that's been working through the consultation process, in which we will be seeking or we'll be reporting the deliberation and adoption at the Infrastructure Ops Committee in August. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent, thank you. Colleagues, any questions of Robin and her report?
From me?
Go ahead, Councillor Marr.
Yeah, just for clarification, page 75, the Hefe Terrace Shopping Centre, the speed reduction is it from red to red? Or is it?
Let me find the right picture
Sorry,
so I can just make sure.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I'm colourblind, so when you go using reds and greens, but anyway.
Apologies for that.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
But yes, it is. So basically, we've got 2 entrance points at either end where there's existing refuge islands that will be.
Fantastic. That's how I read it too. Yes. So yep. Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Maxine.
Thank you. Peter Boss, in his submission, talked about a raised platform at the beginning, I believe, of Mahoe Street as a street calming. Is that also included in the improvements in the area?
So that's not currently proposed. Certainly happy to add that as a potential improvement for the future. Yeah. We've got lots of streets where we'd like to do that sort of entrance treatment moving forward. I would note also that hopefully the Accessible Streets regulatory package, which I know I've talked to committee members ad nauseum about, will come through this calendar year, and that will change the requirements for drivers to give way when turning left into intersections such as this, or off the main road into a side road. Will have a requirement to give way to pedestrians and cyclists wanting to cross. We're just not exactly sure what markings or facilities we might need to have in place to make that the case, if anything. But I guess the short answer is no, we don't have it planned at this stage. We can certainly add it to list for consideration.
And that would be under the low cost, low risk, is that right?
Walking and cycling, yes.
Right, okay. Oh, good one. And can be, because I think he talked about the cutout being at an odd angle for, and I'd never considered the looking down and not looking out when you're crossing the road. So I thought that was quite a good point, well made.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. He also, in his submission, mentioned some other road calming. Was it him or was it Mr. Van Dyke? Talked about other road calming and the real issue that they have locally with racing up the street. And I guess so my question there would be, in our monitoring, do we have, because he talked about 100 kilometres an hour potentially, that sounds extreme. Does our evidence support that kind of claim?
I think it's really hard to actually judge speeds and, just standing out there looking, which is why we use the tube counts.
Yep.
For Mahoe Street at this stage, we're not proposing to put any physical changes in place, but we are proposing to alter the parking such that currently it's got no stopping on one side and parking on the other, which in effect gives you still a straight line. So by moving the parking around, it requires you to do more of a snake-like manoeuvre down there. And we believe that that will have a really good impact on the speeds through the street, and that's based on our experience elsewhere. Yeah. But we have undertaken to do monitoring after that's in place and to ensure that that is the case. Right. If it isn't, then we would look to come back and put some physical works into support.
And the report talked about 5% reduction in speeds once the treatments were done.
About a 5K, yes.
5 kilo, what did I say?
5%.
Oh, 5%, 5 kilometres, yeah. Oh, golly. Thank you. Would that be enough, though, if we had cars going quite a lot
I think
faster?
In any street you get the occasional car that goes particularly quick, and that really is hard to address.
Okay.
What we look at is the majority of the vehicles getting down to those lower speeds. So, I guess, as I said, we're happy to put it in place and do that monitoring. If we need to, we can come back.
And I did note that overwhelming support for the speed limit reduction from the
yes, there
community.
seems to be good support from this community. Yes.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Robin and Chair.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, can I just refer you to page 73, the Cobham Drive item with the 80k, the adjustment. Can you just explain that thoroughly, if you would, so I get that totally?
So it's probably, I'm just trying to find the picture on page 76 is probably slightly easier. Have you found that one, Councillor Martin?
Page 76, yes, 79.
Yes.
With the roundabout?
That's correct, yes. So currently the location of the 50k sign is in Anzac Parade, halfway between Tristram Street and Anglesey Street. What we're wanting to do is move that back to be in Cobham Drive just prior to the intersection, so that, and this is a general thing, approach that we're wanting to take, so to encourage the lower speed through the intersection. Because what you end up is with the kind of perverse situation where just before an intersection you end up with a sign that tells you to go even faster, which is, not really the right messaging. So it's not a major change, but it is, I guess, a philosophical change to have a lower speed limit through the intersection.
So the section back to Normandy is still 80k, is that right?
It is.
Was that changed?
So at the moment, we're leaving that in place with the new speed management plan that's just going through its final stages and will be coming to the Infrastructure Ops Committee. We're proposing that it gets lowered to 60, and once that plan's in place, then we'll be able to do that change.
Two-step. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Maxine is happy to move the staff's recommendations. I will happily second. That's on page 58. Any further questions? If not, I'll open it up for debate. Councillor Maxine as mover, and then followed by Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I
Okay, thank you. Councillor Martin, are you wanting to speak?
Yes, and I realise this is a panel, so we're not, if you like, in political debate. I respect that. The observation I would make, and I've said this before, totally support these recommendations as thoroughly consistent with the policy of this council in the interest of road safety and pedestrian and driver safety. I would make the observation to Evelisa, of course, in the next LTP, is the ongoing work we must do, and this is a general comment, to ensure that the design of our slow streets match the speed limits. Now, I support absolutely the slow limits. I happen to live in a street personally where it's got a lower speed limit than 40k, but I respect that ultimately there has to be design along the street that actually encourages traffic to observe those safe speeds and helps pedestrian cyclists. Now, that's just a general comment, Mr. Chair. So I think we recognise the regulatory thing, which is correct, but obviously there is an ongoing challenge in our LTP to ensure adequate resource goes into retrofit and good design.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Mark.
To echo Councillor Martin's comments, really respect the work that the team are doing, Evelisa and Robin in particular. It's really neat to see that coming through, because one word I picked up on there, which Martin used, was consistency, and I quite like that. I mean, traffic, speed is something that's dear to my heart, but I really like the work council are doing in this space. I think it's really good. So I take my hat off to you and keep up the good work. It's really good to see, especially that I really like that Hefe Terrace design as well. I think that's got the hallmarks of becoming quite a neat little suburban village, if you like. And man, I've been through there when it's very busy time, and even as an experienced pedestrian myself, felt a little bit conscious of crossing the road there and dealing with traffic. So well done, good stuff.
Councillor Maxine, do you want to write a reply? No. Good. Right, we'll put the motion. Does anybody want it up on the board? I think it's all pretty clear. All those in favour say aye. Those against, the ayes have it. If that's all right, Norel. Colleagues, that brings us to an end. Thank you for your forbearance today, and as we navigated a couple of those process issues, I think ultimately we got to where we needed to be, so thank you. Cheers.